Human beings are messy creatures. Sometimes wonderful, sometimes awful, always complex. And today's gospel includes the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of human nature. It's a complex story with no happy ending. Now, one way to wrestle with such a story is to focus on the individual characters in the story. Focus on what they do and what they don't do, on what they say and on what they don't say, on how their reality relates to the world that we live in. So today, I'd like to focus on the family at the center of our gospel story. Let's start with Herod. Even though Herod authorizes an unthinkable act of violence, he's portrayed somewhat sympathetically in today's story. Herod seems to be of two minds about John the Baptist. He arrests John, but he also listens to what John has to say. He's not happy with John's criticism of him for taking his brother's wife as his own. But Herod thinks of John as a righteous, holy man. According to the story, Herod protects John, although we don't exactly know how he actually does that. Ultimately, Herod has John killed. He regrets his actions, but it's out of his control. Herod's guilt over what he's done leads him to believe that Jesus is John resurrected. The Herod in this story appears to be as much a pawn as he is a persecutor. But is Herod really that sympathetic? Herod has a lot of power. Power to take another man's wife as his own. Power to have John arrested. Power to have John killed. Herod can afford to be curious about John because he has John's life in his hands. He has the power to let John live. But Herod's fear of losing power is greater than his admiration for John. Herod uses the oppressive power given to him by the Roman Empire to get rid of a perceived threat to that empire and to himself. Herod is no pawn. Herod exercises an abuse of power over those less powerful. And though we may not see ourselves as participants in this type of power dynamic, it can creep into our everyday lives. It happens when we talk over or ignore others, when we threaten to withdraw support if something isn't going our way, when we don't listen before we act on behalf of someone else, and when we don't consider how our actions actually affect others. All of these are forms of a type of power that centers the one in power and diminishes others. Herod isn't the only one who abuses their power. His wife Herodias is the woman behind the man who sets in motion the events that lead up to John's death. She's angry about how John badmouths Herod and wants to find a way to get rid of him. Herod's promise of an unspecified gift to his daughter is the perfect opportunity for Herodias to deal with John, and she does so in a gruesome fashion. To be clear, I don't in any way condone what Herodias does. But this story puts her in the role of simply being the manipulative woman who's blamed for Herod's actions. And the truth is much more complicated than that. Remember, Herodias was originally the wife of Herod's brother, Philip. And Herod, using know how Herodias feels about this. But what we do know is that Herodias, as a woman living in a patriarchal, has no bodily autonomy. She's treated as a piece of property that can be transferred from one man to another. She has no power to object to it or stop it. And with all due respect to John the Baptist, he points an accusing finger at Herodias' new marital arrangement, unaware of the implications for her. John's accusations threaten what little social status Herodias might have had as Herod's wife. And social status, no matter how it's attained, is the one thing that can slightly protect a woman in that time and that place. Herodias is a woman owned by a man she didn't choose and accused by a man who doesn't understand her precarious position. Is it any wonder that she might be a little bit angry? So when an opportunity to exploit her husband's power comes her way, she takes it. What she does is as wrong as it is tragic. Tragic first and foremost for John the Baptist. But it's tragic for Herodias as well, because she's forever remembered as an evil, conniving woman without any consideration of her circumstances or station in life. Herodias is a cautionary tale of what can happen when a person with little or no autonomy is harmed by the choices of others. In our own lives, we may have experienced such harm ourselves. And in our world, many people continue to be oppressed by a perceived status as less than in the eyes of others. The final member of this family-driven saga is the daughter of Herod. This young girl, who is probably about 12 years old, dances for guests at a banquet that her father is hosting. He's so pleased with her performance that he does what parents often do. He overpromises, saying that she can have anything up to half his kingdom. The idea of such a huge gift is overwhelming for the young girl. Understandably excited, she rushes to her mother seeking advice for what to ask. And this gives Herodias the opportunity to use her daughter to get what she herself wants. What strikes me about this child is that we all know almost nothing about her or how she feels. Who knows if she really wants to dance for a group of adults? Is she eager to please her father? Or is she resentful about being put on display? And most importantly, how does she feel as everything unfolds around her? How does it affect a child to be part of such a horrific event? The needs of the girl are inconsequential. She's being used by adults to fulfill their own self-serving desires. Both her mother and father play a part in the erasing of their daughter's personhood. She's simply a tool to be used in their political drama to get rid of a social embarrassment that could have wider political implications. Because John the Baptist is gaining followers. People are listening to him. So Herod wants to get rid of him. Herodias wants to get rid of him. And they use their child as a pawn to commit an unforgivable act. Children are still used for political advantage by adults in power. Think about images of children in cages, or children trained to be child soldiers, or children used as human shields. Think about the everyday ways children are used as political props, either as an inspiration or a warning. This happens because children don't have the power adults do. And as a result, they're often overlooked and ignored when it comes to their own well-being. The narrative of this family and their actions is a flashback story inserted in this text after the John the Baptist's death. It doesn't fit the flow of the Gospel of Mark, in which Jesus has already gathered his disciples and is preaching and teaching. So why is this messy, dark story dropped in the middle of the Jesus story? In part, this story serves as a wake-up call to its readers. It reminds us of what being a prophet of God can lead to and what will eventually happen to Jesus. It warns us of what happens when unjust power and oppression have control. And it shows the sharp contrast between the power to oppress, which is the way of Herod, and the power to liberate, which is the way of Jesus. Each of us has a choice in how we move through the world and what path we follow. So given the choice, may we choose the way of Jesus, which brings us to the banquet table where all are welcome. No one is excluded, and everyone is cared for, which includes all of us in the embrace of God's healing love, and gives us the courage to do the work we are given to do together. The work of using our voices to advocate for the powerless, the work of changing unjust systems of power, the work of being instruments of peace and not instigators of violence. The way of Jesus is the way of love, which liberates us all.